The colony world was quiet at night. Far out on the edge of the settlement, where the wind carried dust across empty fields, a small house stood like a lonely shadow. Inside that house lived Ethan, a human mechanic. His life was not filled with riches or adventures. It was filled with tools, machines, and long hours of work. Ethan's hands were hard and scarred from years of labor. His clothes always smelled faintly of oil and smoke. People in the settlement respected him because he could fix almost anything: broken farming machines, power units, even the colony's old transport carriers. Without him, many families would have suffered, but respect was not the same as companionship. When the day ended and the machines stopped humming, Ethan returned to an empty home. Loneliness followed him like a shadow. He tried to ignore it, burying himself in work, but silence filled every corner of his small house. He had once dreamed of a family, of laughter at the table, of someone waiting for him at the door. But those dreams had faded with time. Now, he only dreamed of sleep. It was that loneliness that led him to hire a maid, not because he wanted luxury, but because he wanted another presence in the house, someone to keep the rooms alive, someone to speak to, even if only a little. The maid was not human. Her name was Leora, and she came from a nearby alien star system. Her people were not fighters or builders. They were known for their patience, their skill and care, and their gentle ways. She had soft blue skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under light, and long silver hair that moved like flowing water. Her eyes were golden, bright even in the dark, and when she looked at someone, it felt as if she saw far more than just the surface. At first, Ethan treated her like any worker. He gave her tasks: cleaning, cooking, tending the small garden outside. She accepted each task with calm silence, moving through the house gracefully, almost like she belonged there. She spoke very little, but when she did, her voice carried a softness that lingered in the air. Ethan did not understand her. She never complained, never asked for anything. She simply worked, always watching quietly, always listening. Sometimes he caught her eyes on him when he was bent over an engine, sweat dripping from his forehead, his hands buried in wires. When he looked up, she would look away quickly, as if caught in a secret thought. Days passed like this, simple, quiet, uneventful, but slowly, something began to change. Ethan, who had lived in silence for years, started noticing small things. The way Leora placed fresh food on the table, without being asked. The way she hummed faintly while cleaning, a sound like a distant song. The way the house no longer felt heavy with emptiness, but lighter, as if her presence alone had chased away the shadows. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan sat in his workshop staring at a broken generator. His back ached, his eyes burned from lack of sleep, and his stomach growled. He had been too tired to cook. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, his wrench slipping from his hand. He thought he was alone, but the door opened softly, and Leora entered, carrying a small tray of food. Her golden eyes rested on him, and for the first time, her calm expression broke into something else: a small, gentle smile. In that moment, Ethan realized something he had not wanted to admit. He was no longer alone. The maid he had hired was not just filling the silence of the house. She was slowly filling the silence in his heart, and though Ethan did not yet know it, that simple night, her stepping quietly into his workshop, her eyes lingering on him, was the beginning of a story that would change his life forever. The night was still. Outside, the colony lay under a blanket of silence, the wind carrying dust over empty roads. Inside Ethan's small workshop, the air smelled of iron, smoke, and old wires. He had worked until his body gave up, falling asleep in his chair with his head tilted back and a wrench loose in his hand. His chest was bare, streaked with grease from long hours. His tool, the heavy spanner he had been using, lay across his lap. The generator beside him hummed weakly, half finished, its faint glow lighting the room with a dull blue. Ethan didn't hear the soft creak of the door. He didn't see the shadow slip in. It was Liora. She carried a small tray with a bowl of soup and bread, the steam rising into the cool air. Her golden eyes searched the room and landed on Ethan, sleeping heavily in the chair. For a long moment, she did not move. Her gaze softened. She had seen him like this many times, bent over machines, working long past the point when others would have stopped. But tonight, something was different. He was not just tired. He looked vulnerable, human in a way she rarely saw. His lips moved faintly in his sleep, whispering words she could not hear. Leora's heart stirred. She had not meant to see him like this. She had only wanted to bring him food so he would not starve himself again. Yet now, standing in the doorway, she felt like an intruder in a moment that was too private, too fragile. She should have turned back, but instead, she stepped closer. The light from the generator touched her silver hair, making it glow faintly. She looked at him with eyes full of quiet thought. To her people, humans were strange, so loud, so stubborn, so fragile, and yet so strong in their persistence. She had been told humans did not break easily, but here he was, worn down, fighting sleep, as though even rest was a battle. A small laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. It was not cruel, not mocking. It was soft, warm, born from seeing how absurdly human he was. A man who fought machines by day, fought his own body by night, and still thought himself nothing special. The sound stirred Ethan awake. He blinked, groggy, his eyes adjusting to the light. His first sight was Leora, standing before him, holding a tray, her face caught between guilt and softness. "Leora," he muttered, his voice rough with sleep. "What are you doing here?" She lowered her gaze quickly. "Forgive me, Master Ethan, I did not want you to sleep without food." Her words were simple, but they carried something deeper, something trembling. Ethan rubbed his eyes, confused, then looked at her again. He noticed details he hadn't before: the way her hands trembled just slightly as she held the tray, the faint glow of her skin in the dim light, the quiet strength in her golden eyes. You didn't have to," he said softly. "I know," she whispered, almost too quietly, "but I wanted to." The room grew still again. The generator hummed, the steam from the soup curled upward, and for a moment, the air between them felt heavy with unspoken meaning. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, sitting up straighter, pulling the wrench off his lap. He should have felt embarrassed, half-dressed, caught in his exhaustion, but strangely, he didn't. What he felt instead was a warmth in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Her voice broke the silence. "You work too hard, Ethan. Your body is not endless. Even machines need rest." He gave a weak smile, says the maid who never seems to stop moving. Her lips curved slightly, the smallest smile, but her eyes stayed serious. "I move because I have purpose, but you move because you don't know how to stop." The words struck him deeper than he expected. He wanted to argue, to laugh it off, but he couldn't. She was right. He worked not just to survive, but to avoid the silence, the emptiness. Work had become his shield against loneliness. And she, this quiet alien woman, had seen straight through him. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "You sound like you know me better than I do myself." Leora finally lifted her gaze, golden eyes, meeting his. "Perhaps I do." The air trembled between them. Ethan felt his heart pound, though he didn't understand why. She was only his maid, just someone he had hired to chase away the silence. And yet, standing there, her words echoing in his ears, he knew this was not ordinary. This was not just a maid caring for her master. This was the beginning of something neither of them could name. And in that fragile silence, Ethan realized his quiet, lonely life had already begun to change. The next morning came slowly. The colony's twin suns rose over the horizon, painting the dusty sky in orange and pale gold. Ethan woke late, his body heavy, but his mind restless. The memory of the night before lingered. Leora standing in the workshop, her eyes holding truths he had tried to bury for years. He rubbed his face with tired hands, trying to shake the feeling. She was only his maid, he told himself again. She was here for work, for duty, nothing more. But still, he could not forget the way her voice had trembled when she said she wanted to bring him food. Not because she had to, but because she wanted. When Ethan stepped out of his room, he found her already busy in the small kitchen. She moved gracefully, her silver hair catching the morning light. The soft sound of water running, the gentle clink of dishes, it all felt strangely comforting. "Good morning," he said, his voice low. She turned at once, bowing her head slightly. "Good morning, Master Ethan." There it was, again that word, master. He had grown used to it, but today it felt heavier, like a barrier between them. He sat at the table while she placed food in front of him. Fresh bread, warm broth, and a few fruits from the colony garden. She worked silently, her movements careful, yet her eyes kept flicking toward him, as if she was searching for something. Finally, Ethan sighed. "About last night." Her hands froze for a second, then continued arranging the tray. "Yes," she asked softly. "You didn't need to do that," he said. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything." Leora looked at him. Then, her golden eyes shining with quiet strength. "It was not duty. I chose to." Ethan stared at her, lost for words. He wanted to laugh it off, to turn the moment into something light, but instead, he felt a strange pull in his chest. The silence stretched too long, and suddenly, the room felt too small, too heavy. He cleared his throat. I don't want you to think I'm weak." Falling asleep like that, tools still in my lap, it must have looked ridiculous. To his surprise, she shook her head. "Not ridiculous, human." He frowned. "Human." "Yes," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You work until you collapse, but not for yourself. You work for others, for the colony, for strangers who would never thank you. That is not weakness. That is what makes you different from my people." Her words struck deep. He felt a tightness in his chest he didn't understand. No one had spoken of him like that before. Not his coworkers, not the settlers. No one. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "You make me sound like more than I am." She tilted her head, her silver hair falling softly across her shoulder. "Perhaps you are more than you believe." The moment held them both, fragile and unspoken. He felt the urge to reach across the table, to take her hand, to ask her why she cared so much. But fear stopped him. Fear of breaking something delicate. Fear of crossing a line that should not be crossed. Instead, he looked down at his food and muttered, "You're too kind." Leora said nothing, but her golden eyes lingered on him, carrying a warmth that words could never reach. That day, Ethan tried to lose himself in work. He returned to the workshop, fixing machines, tightening bolts, welding broken parts. But no matter how hard he tried, his thoughts drifted back to her quiet smile, to her voice telling him he was not weak, to the way she had looked at him not as a master, not as a mechanic, but as someone worth seeing. By evening, when he returned home, he found her outside in the garden. She was kneeling among the small alien flowers she had planted, her hands brushing the soil gently. The fading sunlight caught her hair, making it glow like silver fire. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her. For the first time in years, his heart felt restless, not from loneliness, but from something new, something dangerous, something human. The days passed slowly, but something inside Ethan was no longer the same. Every time he saw Leora, a quiet storm rose in his chest. He tried to bury it under work, under the weight of tools and machines, but it followed him everywhere. Her voice, her eyes, the way she looked at him as if he mattered, it lingered. One evening, rain poured hard on the colony roof, striking against the metal sheets like 1,000 tiny drums. The storm outside was fierce, but the storm inside, Ethan, was worse. He sat at the table, staring into his untouched food, while Leora moved quietly around the kitchen. Her presence filled the small house with warmth. But to Ethan, it also brought pain. He could no longer ignore what he felt. He could no longer pretend she was only a maid. The truth pressed against his chest until he finally spoke. "Leora," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. She paused, turning toward him with calm golden eyes. "Yes, Master Ethan." That word master cut deeper than ever. He clenched his fists against the table. "Why are you here? Why did you choose this place, this house, this life? You could be anywhere else, with people better than me." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened. She set down the cloth in her hands and stepped closer. "Why do you think others are better than you?" He laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in it. "Because I'm nothing special. I fix machines. I eat. I sleep. I work until I break. That's all. People don't need me, they need what I can do. And when I'm gone, someone else will take my place." Leora stood still, her golden eyes never leaving his face. For a moment, she said nothing. The rain outside grew heavier, the thunder rolling across the sky. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but filled with quiet fire. "You think strength is in never breaking, but strength is in breaking and still rising again. You think you are nothing, but you are the reason others survive. Without your hands, their machines fail. Without your will, their homes go dark. Without your heart, even this house would be empty." Her words pierced him like a blade. Ethan looked away, his throat tightening. "You don't understand. I'm tired, Leora, so tired. Every day feels heavier. Sometimes I wonder if I keep working just so I don't have to feel the silence waiting for me when the machines stop." For the first time, Leora moved closer, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her presence. Her hand trembled as she reached out, touching his arm lightly. Her skin was cool, soft, but the meaning in her touch was stronger than any words. "I do understand," she whispered. "I know loneliness. I know silence. I came here not just to serve, but to find meaning too, and I found it in you." Ethan turned sharply, his eyes wide. "In me? Why?" Her lips curved in the faintest, saddest smile. "Because humans are strange. You hide your pain, yet you keep moving. You think you are small, but your heart carries more than you realize. My people admire beauty, yours admire strength, but you carry both, even when you are broken." The words shattered him. His chest ached with something he had kept locked away for too long. Loneliness, weariness, the desperate wish that anyone would see him. Not just the mechanic, not just the worker, but the man beneath. His voice cracked when he spoke. Again, "I'm not strong, Leora. I'm just surviving." She stepped closer still, her golden eyes shining like a soft light in the dark storm. Her voice was a whisper now, gentle but firm. "Even surviving takes strength." Ethan could no longer hold back. His eyes burned, his throat tight, but he let the truth escape. "I don't know why, but when you speak to me, it feels like I'm alive again." Leora's hand lingered on his arm, her touch steady now, no longer trembling. Her golden gaze held his unflinching. "That is because you are alive, Ethan. You just forgot how it feels." The thunder roared outside, but inside the small house, there was only silence, and intimate, fragile silence between two souls who had finally spoken. Truths they could no longer hide. For Ethan, it was the breaking point, but it was also the beginning of something new. The storm outside passed by morning, leaving the air cool and heavy with the scent of wet soil. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin streams, painting the colony in pale gold. Inside Ethan's house, silence lingered. Not the empty silence of loneliness, But the fragile silence after words that could not be forgotten. Ethan had not slept much that night. He had turned in his bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing Leora's words again and again. Even surviving takes strength. She had said it so simply, as if it were truth, as if he were more than just a tired man fixing broken things. When the morning came, he found her outside in the garden. She was kneeling in the soil, her slender hands brushing over the alien flowers she had planted weeks ago. The blossoms shimmered faintly in the light, their colors shifting between blue and violet. She hummed softly, her silver hair falling forward as she worked. For a while, Ethan just stood in the doorway, watching her. Something stirred deep in him, something gentle, something dangerous. He realized then that his fear was no longer about being alone. His fear was about losing her, about waking one day and finding this quiet presence gone from his life. Taking a breath, he stepped outside. The ground was still damp beneath his boots, the air cool against his skin. Leora looked up when she sensed him, her golden eyes meeting his without surprise. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice rough from lack of sleep. He came closer, kneeling beside her. His hands touched the soil too, rough and scarred compared to hers. For a while, they worked in silence, placing seeds, pressing soil, watering roots. But Ethan's heart was not in the garden. It was in the words pressing against his chest, desperate to be spoken. Finally, he broke the silence. "Leora, I need to tell you something?" She paused, her golden eyes turning toward him. There was no fear in them, only patience. "Yes," Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. "I've been alone for a long time. So long that I forgot what it feels like to be seen. People in the colony respect me, but they don't really know me. To them, I'm just the man who fixes machines. But you look at me as if I'm more than that." Her eyes softened, a faint light flickering within them. "Because you are." His chest tightened. The words tumbled out, raw and unsteady. "When you walked into the workshop that night, when you brought me food, when you said those things, it woke something inside me, something I thought was dead." He stopped, breathing hard, afraid to continue, but unable to stop. "I don't know if I have the right to say this. I don't know if it's fair, but Leora, I don't see you as just my maid anymore. I see you as someone who matters, to me, more than I can explain." The garden was quiet. The only sound was the soft drip of water from the leaves and the faint hum of distant insects. Leora's golden eyes shimmered, and, for the first time, Ethan saw her lips tremble. She set down the small pot in her hands, her fingers brushing against the damp earth. Slowly, carefully, she spoke. "Ethan, do you know why I chose this place? Why I came to your house, when I could have worked in richer homes, among families with more comfort?" Ethan shook his head silently. "Because I wanted to find someone who was true," she whispered. "Someone who lived not with wealth, but with heart. When I first saw you, you were quiet, worn, and alone. But you kept moving, you kept giving. That is why I stayed. Not for duty, not for work, for you." Her words struck him harder than any blade. His eyes burned, his chest ached, but for once, he did not turn away from the feeling. Slowly, he reached out, his rough hand trembling as it touched hers. The contrast was sharp, his skin scarred and calloused, hers soft and glowing faintly, but she did not pull away. Instead, her fingers curled gently around his, holding them with surprising strength. "Then stay," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not as my maid, not as someone bound by duty. Stay as someone who sees me. Stay because you want to." Her golden eyes shone with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. "Then let me stay, Ethan, not as your servant, but as your companion." In that moment, with their hands clasped together in the damp soil, Ethan felt the silence of his life finally break. It was not filled with noise or laughter, but with something far greater: connection. and for the first time in years, he believed he was no longer alone. From that day onward, life inside Ethan's small house changed. It was not a sudden shift, but a slow and gentle one, like dawn chasing away the night. The silence that had once pressed heavy on the walls no longer felt empty. It was warm now, filled with small sounds, her voice humming softly, her footsteps moving across the floor, the quiet rhythm of two people sharing space. Ethan no longer saw Leora as a maid. He could not. She was something else entirely now. She still cooked, cleaned and cared for the house, but it felt different. She did not move like a servant. She moved like a companion, someone who belonged, someone who shared his days, someone who carried the same weight of loneliness and had chosen him as her shelter in return. Ethan began to let her into parts of his life he had always kept locked away. When he worked in the workshop, she would sit beside him, not speaking much, just watching. Sometimes she would hand him tools, her delicate fingers brushing against his rough ones. Sometimes she would simply sit in silence, golden eyes glowing in the dim light as though reminding him he was never alone. For Ethan, that was enough, more than enough. One night, after a long day of repairing broken colony transports, Ethan came home exhausted. His shoulders ached, his hands were cut from sharp wires, and his head pounded with fatigue. He expected to collapse alone in his bed, as he always had. But when he opened the door, he found Leora waiting, a small lantern glowing beside her. "You're late," she said softly, though her voice carried no judgmentally concern. "Work took longer than I thought," Ethan replied, pulling off his boots. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the cuts on his hands. Without a word, she brought a bowl of water and cloth. She sat across from him and began cleaning his wounds gently. Her touch was careful, her movements slow, as if she were afraid of causing him more pain. Ethan watched her in silence, his chest tightening. No one had done this for him in years. No one had cared enough to see beyond the grease and the scars. "You don't have to," he whispered, her golden eyes lifted to his. "I want to." The words were simple, but they filled his heart with a warmth he could not describe. He let her finish, saying nothing more, afraid that if he spoke, the fragile moment might shatter. That night, when he lay down to rest, he found Leora sitting near the bed, her presence calm and steady. At first, he told her she should rest in her own room, but she only shook her head. "This place is no longer just yours," she said quietly. "It is ours. A den, a place where two souls can rest, not one." Her words stayed with him. The bed, which had once been a cold refuge for one man, became a shared space. Sometimes she slept nearby, her silver hair spread like light across the pillow. Sometimes she simply sat awake, keeping the night company, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan no longer feared the silence of the night, because it was no longer empty. He began to notice how much she laughed now. Not loudly, but softly, with warmth, at his clumsy jokes, or the stories he shared of old colony days. Her laughter was like rain on dry soil, giving life where there had been none. And when Ethan worked late into the night, he no longer woke up alone in the workshop. Sometimes, he would find her curled up in a chair nearby, having fallen asleep while waiting for him. Other times, she would gently touch his shoulder and whisper, "Rest, Ethan. Even the strongest hands need sleep." Every little act chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. And with every passing day, Ethan realized that his house, once only a shelter against loneliness, had become something more. It had become home, not because of the walls or the machines, but because of her. And as the nights grew softer, Ethan understood the truth. His bed was no longer his alone. It was a den, warm, safe, alive, because two souls now shared it. For the first time in years, he no longer dreamed of silence, he dreamed of her. Years passed quietly, yet each day seemed brighter than the last. Ethan was still the colony's mechanic, Still the man who worked until his hands ached and his back bent. But now, he was no longer alone. Every night when he came home, there was warmth waiting for him, light in the window, the smell of food, the sound of gentle footsteps, and the sight of golden eyes that never stopped watching him with care. Leora had become more than his companion. She had become his heart. She still moved with quiet grace, still cared for the house, still tended the garden, but she was no longer the maid he had once hired. She was his partner in every way. The settlers whispered about them sometimes. Humans and aliens rarely shared homes, let alone lives. Some people found it strange, some found it beautiful, but Ethan did not care what others thought. The only truth that mattered was the one he lived every day, that love, no matter where it came from, could fill even the emptiest soul. One evening, as the sun set low and the colony lights flickered on in the distance, Ethan sat with Lee on the porch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of soil and growing flowers. They sat close, her hand resting lightly against his, their fingers brushing without needing to be held tightly. He broke the silence first. "Do you ever miss your world?" She turned her golden eyes toward the horizon, her silver hair catching the fading light. For a moment, she was quiet, and he thought she might say yes. But then she shook her head gently. "I do not miss a place. I miss nothing, because I found where I belong, here, beside you." Her words struck him deep, as they always did. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "You know, I never thought anyone would say that to me. I always believed I'd live and die alone. Just another mechanic who kept things running. Just another man the world forgot." She leaned closer, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. "The world may forget, but I will not. Humans think strength is in machines, in building, in conquering, but your true gift is here." She touched his chest gently, just above his heart. "Your strength is in how you love, even when you think you are broken. That is why I chose you." The words made his throat tighten. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. He did not speak for a long time. He did not need to. The truth was already there, between them, stronger than anything he could say. As the stars filled the night sky, Ethan thought about what it meant to be human. It was not the machines he built, nor the strength of his body. It was the way his heart had opened when he least expected it, the way he had learned to see another soul not as different, but as equal. Humanity's gift was not in surviving alone, it was in reaching out, even across worlds, and finding connection. And Leora, in all her quiet beauty, had chosen him not because he was powerful, not because he was rich, but because he was human, because even in his weakness, he had kept moving, kept giving, kept hoping without realizing it. Years later, when the settlers told stories of Ethan and the alien woman who stayed by his side, they spoke of it with wonder. Some called it strange. Some called it proof that humans could bond with anyone. But those who had known Ethan before saw the truth they saw. How love had transformed a weary mechanic into something greater. Ethan himself never cared for legends or stories. He only cared for the quiet moments, the warmth of her hand in his, the sound of her laughter in the house, the feeling of peace when they shared a bed that was no longer just a bed, but a den, a refuge for two souls who had found each other in the vast emptiness of the universe. And when his days grew old, and his hands trembled too much to hold tools, Leora was still there. She never left. She never wavered. She remained, her golden eyes watching over him, her silver hair brushing against his face as she whispered, "You are not alone." In the end, Ethan understood. Humanity's greatest gift was not in strength, not in invention, not in survival. It was in the heart, and it was that heart, fragile, stubborn, endlessly giving, that had turned a lonely house into a home, a simple bed into a den, and a tired mechanic into a man worth remembering.